The rhythmic clink of crystal against marble echoed through the VIP section as I balanced a tray of empty champagne flutes on one hand, my other reaching for the vintage decanter. "Table 4 wants their usual scotch," Mariah whispered, brushing past me with a knowing smile, "and your tattooed regular at booth 7 just arrived." "He's early tonight." I glanced up from polishing wine glasses, that familiar awareness prickling at the back of my neck whenever Kenji Han walked through Onyx Lounge's doors. 6 weeks he'd been coming here, always Friday at midnight, always alone except for the silent mountain of a man who followed 3 steps behind. I still couldn't figure out why someone who could buy the entire restaurant chose to sit in the shadows nursing $200 bottles he barely touched. "He tips in hundreds," Mariah continued, adjusting her apron with practiced efficiency. "And those tattoos? Girl, I'd serve him for free." She winked. "What's your problem?" The problem was that everything about Kenji Han set off warning signals in my brain. Not the screaming kind that sent you running, but the whispered kind that told you to pay attention. My chemistry degree had trained me to detect anomalies, to recognize when molecular patterns didn't align, and Kenji Han was a walking chemical equation that refused to balance. "No problem," I lied, smoothing down my black uniform and catching my reflection in the polished espresso machine. My natural curls were wrestled into a professional bun, though a few had escaped during the rush. At 23, I'd perfected the art of looking competent and approachable, essential when your tuition depended on wealthy patrons leaving tips that matched their egos. The lounge pulsed with its usual late-night energy, executives celebrating hostile takeovers, couples conducting affairs they thought were discreet, influencers performing their curated lives for invisible audiences. I'd become an expert at reading the unspoken hierarchies, the subtle power plays that unfolded beneath dim lighting and jazz standards. Chemistry had taught me that reactions happened in layers most people never bother to observe. Tonight, though, the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a reaction went volatile. I'd first noticed it around 11:45, when Shin, Kenji's ever-present bodyguard, had checked his watch 4 times in 6 minutes. The $5,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux hit Kenji's chest like a gunshot, crimson spreading across his white shirt in a pattern that looked disturbingly arterial. For one suspended second, the entire VIP section froze, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Then Shin's hand went to his jacket. "Poison," I gasped, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. "The glass rim. Cyanide. I can smell." Kenji's eyes locked onto mine, and I watched the calculation happen in real time. Most men would have demanded proof, explanations, credentials. But Kenji Han hadn't survived in his world by ignoring survival instincts, and apparently, my terror was convincing enough. His hand shot out and flipped the marble table on its edge just as Shin's gun cleared his holster. The crack of the first shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet embedding itself in Italian marble with a sound like breaking teeth. Champagne flutes exploded into crystal rain, and somewhere behind me, Mariah screamed. Kenji's arm locked around my waist, yanking me down behind the overturned table as 2 more shots punched through the leather booth behind us. I could smell the wine soaking into the carpet, mixing with gunpowder and my own adrenaline-spiked sweat, a chemical cocktail of fight or flight. "The kitchen," Kenji said, his voice utterly calm despite the chaos erupting around us. His hand moved to the small of his back, emerging with a matte black pistol that looked too natural in his grip. "When I move, you move. Don't think. Don't stop." Another shot shattered the lighting fixture above us, plunging half the VIP section into darkness. I heard Shin shouting something in Korean, heard answering footsteps. He hadn't come alone.
"Now."
Kenji rose like a coiled spring releasing, firing 3 precise shots that I didn't see land but heard impact. The wet thud of bullets finding flesh, the crash of bodies hitting furniture. His other hand never left my wrist as he hauled me through the maze of overturned chairs and fleeing patrons. The kitchen doors exploded inward under Kenji's shoulder. Chefs scattered like molecules under pressure as we burst through, Kenji's gun tracking movements with mechanical precision. Behind us, the doors swung again, Shin's backup pouring through with their own weapons drawn. The alley exit, I choked out, remembering the emergency route from my first week of training. Kenji didn't question how I knew. He simply adjusted our trajectory, one arm around my shoulders, shielding me with his body as we crashed through the fire exit. The night air hit my face like cold water, and then we were running, glass from the shattered exit door crunching under our feet like broken stars. The black SUV materialized from nowhere, its door already open. Kenji practically threw me inside, diving in after me as bullets sparked off the reinforced chassis. The door slammed. The engine roared. And Onyx Lounge disappeared behind us into a haze of cordite and blood-red wine. The safe house was disappointingly mundane, a concrete box in an industrial district that smelled like disinfectant and old cigarettes. Kenji locked 3 separate deadbolts before finally holstering his weapon, and I realized my hands were shaking so violently I had to sit on them. Talk. His voice was flat, emotionless, as he shrugged out of his wine-stained jacket. The tattoo snaking up his neck seemed to move in the dim light. You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't assume you were part of Shin's play. Part of... My laugh came out slightly unhinged.
Right.
Because my grand plan was to ruin a bottle worth more than my rent and get shot at. Brilliant strategy. His eyes narrowed. 50 seconds. The terror crystallized into something sharper. Anger, maybe, or just the adrenaline finally finding an outlet.
Fine.
Chemistry 101, since apparently we're doing this. I stood, pacing the small space because sitting still felt impossible. Cyanide has a distinctive smell. Bitter almonds. Most people can't detect it. It's genetic, like cilantro tasting like soap. But I can. Convenient. It's called science, not convenience. I spun to face him. When I decanted that wine, the scent hit me wrong. Not the wine itself. That was perfectly aged Cabernet, probably buttery with dark fruit notes. But the glass rim had this chemical signature that didn't belong. Sharp. Sweet bitter. Unmistakable if you know what you're looking for. Kenji leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. And you know what to look for because I'm 3 classes away from a chemistry degree, and I've spent 2 years working with chemical compounds in the university lab. My voice steadied as I fell into the familiar territory of facts and logic. Cyanide poisoning is rapid. Acute exposure causes cellular hypoxia within minutes. You would have felt chest pain, difficulty breathing, confusion. Then seizures. Then death, probably before the ambulance arrived. Something flickered across his face. Not quite belief, but maybe the beginning of it. The concentration on that glass rim was professional. I continued, momentum building. Not some amateur who Googled untraceable poisons. Whoever prepared it knew the exact dosage needed. Knew you well enough to know you'd drink it without suspecting. I paused. Shin checked his watch 4 times before you arrived. He was tracking something. Timing something. Kenji was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edge. You notice Shin's tells. I notice everything. It's kind of my thing, pattern recognition, behavioral analysis, molecular structures. Same skill set, different applications. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly exhausted. Look, I don't know what kind of world you operate in, and frankly, I don't wanna. But I know chemistry, and I know what I smelled. So you can either believe me or not. Your call. He studied me with those unreadable dark eyes, and I watched the calculation happen again, weighing variables, assessing risk, deciding whether I was an asset or a liability. Finally, he nodded once. You saved my life. Yeah, I said quietly. I guess I did. Shin watched the security footage for the third time, his jaw tight as the chemistry student. The fucking waitress ruined everything with one clumsy spill. Except it hadn't been clumsy at all, had it? The way she'd positioned herself, the timing, the calculated fumble. She'd known. He ejected the drive and crushed it under his heel, grinding the plastic into the warehouse floor. 12 years. 12 years of being Kenji Han's shadow, his weapon, his loyal dog. And for what? To watch the old man's son play at legitimacy, turning their empire into some sanitized corporate fantasy where men in suits replace men with guns. Loyalty was a cage dressed up as honor. The other families understood this, the Italians, the Russians, even the upstart cartels moving in from the south. They knew power wasn't inherited or philosophized about over expensive wine. Power was taken, held with an iron fist, and defended without sentimentality. But Kenji, with his grand plans to pivot the family business, his university education, and his naive belief that you could wash blood money clean, had become a liability. Shin poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, not the pretentious vintage garbage Kenji preferred, but honest Korean soju that burned like it meant it. The old man, Kenji's father, had understood. He'd built their territory through fear and reputation, through making examples that echoed in whispers. He would have laughed at his son's talk of transitioning to legitimate logistics operations. The weak spoke of fairness and loyalty because they lacked the spine to seize what they wanted. They wrapped their cowardice in noble language, called their fear principles, convinced themselves that playing by imaginary rules would somehow protect them. But the world didn't work that way. Never had. Kenji's greatest weakness was his certainty that loyalty flowed both ways, that the men who followed him did so out of respect rather than calculation. He'd never understood that every soldier was measuring the weight of their chain against the promise of freedom, that every oath of allegiance was conditional, contingent on the benefit outweighing the risk. Shin had spent years building his own network within Kenji's organization, converting loyalty into leverage, transforming Kenji's trusted circle into his own secret army. Men who understood that the future belonged to those willing to take it, not those waiting for permission. The girl complicated things. She'd seen too much, known too much. Worse, Kenji would see her intervention as some kind of sign, would let that hero complex of his cloud his judgment. He'd want to protect her, probably already had her stashed somewhere, playing knight to her damsel. Predictable. Sentimental. Weak. Shin finished the soju and set the glass down with finality. Kenji thought he was hunting a traitor, but he was already 3 moves behind. By the time he figured out the scope of the betrayal, Shin would own everything. The territory, the connections, the fear. And the chemistry student? She'd make an excellent object lesson about the cost of interference. Some reactions, after all, were irreversible. The world belonged to those who took it. Everything else was just pretty words spoken by the soon-to-be-forgotten. The safe house had a single window facing east, and I watched dawn break over the industrial skyline like a chemical reaction, slow, inevitable, transforming everything it touched. Kenji stood near the kitchenette, brewing coffee with the same precise movements he'd used to field strip and clean his gun an hour earlier. "You don't sleep," I observed, pulling the borrowed jacket tighter around my shoulders. My uniform was ruined, wine-stained and torn, so I was wearing one of his shirts that smelled like cedar and something darker I couldn't identify. "Not when people are trying to kill me." He poured 2 cups, black, no sugar. "You should rest." "Can't." I accepted the coffee, our fingers brushing in the exchange. My brain won't stop running simulations. Chemical pathways, reaction chains, what Shin's next move might be. I paused. "Why did he do it?" "You trusted him." Kenji's hand moved unconsciously to his neck, tracing the edge of the intricate tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar. Trust is a luxury. I inherited Shin along with everything else my father built. "The tattoo," I said quietly. "It's for him, isn't it? Your father." His eyes met mine, surprised. Most people probably didn't ask. The chrysanthemum represents death in Korean tradition, but also rebirth, transformation. My father believed our family could evolve beyond what we were. His smile was bitter. He died before seeing how naive that hope was. I set down my coffee and moved closer, studying the black ink that wound around his throat like elegant chains. You're trying to finish what he started. The legitimate business, the pivot away from... I gestured vaguely. Whatever this is. This, Kenji said, is a cage made of obligations and blood debts. My father built it thinking he was creating security. Instead, he built a prison where the walls are made of family honor, and the bars are men like Shin who profit from keeping things exactly as they are. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who'd flipped tables and fired shots without hesitation. This was someone exhausted by the weight of inherited wars. You know what's funny? I said, tracing the rim of my cup. In chemistry, we call it activation energy, the amount of force needed to break molecular bonds and create something new. Most reactions can't happen without it, no matter how thermodynamically favorable the outcome. The system stays trapped in its current state because change requires too much energy. And sometimes, Kenji added softly, the activation energy is so high that the entire structure has to be destroyed before anything new can form. Catalysts help, I offered. They lower the energy barrier, make impossible reactions possible. He looked at me, then really looked, and something shifted in the space between us. A charge building, potential energy waiting for the right conditions. Is that what you are, Nia Robinson? My catalyst? I'm just a waitress who knows too much chemistry, I whispered, but we both knew I was lying. His hand found mine in the gray morning light, and for the first time since the gunfire, I felt something besides fear. I felt possibility. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m., shattering the fragile peace we constructed in the pre-dawn hours. The number was unknown, but my hands knew before my brain did. They were already shaking as I answered. Nia? My brother's voice, 14 years old, and trying so hard to sound brave. There's some guys here, they said. The line cut to static, then a new voice, smooth and familiar.
Shin.
Chemistry student. How clever you are with your little nose and your periodic tables. I could hear the smile in his voice. Let's see if you can solve this equation. The call ended. 3 seconds later, something scraped against the safe house door. Not a knock, but the deliberate sound of an object being placed. Kenji had his gun drawn before I'd even processed the movement, positioning himself between me and the entrance, like a human shield. He opened the door with tactical precision, weapon trained on empty air. On the concrete step sat a small wooden box, the kind that might hold jewelry or keepsakes. Expensive. Deliberate. A gift from a man who understood psychological warfare. Don't, Kenji warned, but I was already pushing past him, my hands fumbling with the lid. Inside, nestled in black velvet, a glass vial filled with amber liquid. The same bitter almond scent hit me immediately, making my stomach lurch. Cyanide. And underneath, a note in precise handwriting. Chemistry can't save him. The world tilted. I heard a sound like an animal in pain and realized it was coming from me. Marcus. His name is Marcus. He's 14. He has a calculus test Monday. He wants to be an engineer. Kenji's hands gripped my shoulders, forcing me to focus. Where does he live? Who else knows about him? Our apartment. West Side. He's there alone because I work nights and our mom. My breath came in ragged gasps, the careful equilibrium I'd maintained since childhood shattering like the wine glass at Onyx. He's just a kid. He has nothing to do with this. That's exactly why Shin took him. Kenji's voice was cold, clinical, the same tone he'd used while cleaning his gun. Leverage. He knows you're the only witness who can identify the poison method. He's forcing an exchange, Your silence for your brother's life. I looked at the vial, my expertise suddenly weaponized against me. Every reaction I'd studied, every compound I'd analyzed, every molecular structure I'd memorized, none of it mattered. Chemistry had taught me that systems sought equilibrium, that reactions moved toward stability. But this wasn't a closed system. This was chaos theory, human malice, the unpredictable variable that no equation could solve. "We're not trading anything," Kenji said, reading my expression. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. "We're going to war." "With what?" "You said yourself Shin converted half your organization. We're outnumbered, outgunned. We have something Shin doesn't." Kenji looked at me, and I saw the criminal strategist replace the vulnerable man from Dawn's confession. "We have you, your brain, your chemistry, and my very motivated desire to make him regret touching your family." He handed me his phone. On the screen, a list of contacts, resources, locations. "Show me what a catalyst can really do." Kenji's remaining loyal men arrived in intervals, materializing from the gray morning like ghosts solidifying. 3 of them, all that remained trustworthy from an organization of 30. The math was brutal, but Kenji's face showed no reaction as he laid out schematics on the safe house table. "Shin's holding the boy at the old Nakamoto shipyard," he said, tapping the blueprints. "Industrial complex, multiple exits, high ground advantage." He chose well. "How many men?" asked June, the shortest of the 3, his hand never leaving his weapon. "Assume 10 minimum. Shin wouldn't risk fewer." Kenji traced entry points with clinical precision, and I watched him transform into something colder, more calculating. This was the man his father had trained, the strategist who'd survived a world where miscalculation meant death. I studied the schematics over his shoulder, my mind already cataloging the industrial notations. "Wait. Nakamoto Shipyard. They manufacture industrial coatings, right? Marine-grade sealants." For sets of eyes turned toward me. "You're staying here," Kenji said flatly. "This isn't negotiable." "Like hell it isn't." I moved to the table, claiming space. "You're planning a frontal assault on a fortified position with a 3 to 10 personnel disadvantage. That's not strategy. That's suicide with extra steps." "Nia." "No, you listen." My finger jabbed at the blueprint. "I've been inside facilities like this for lab procurement. They store volatile compounds, acetone, methyl ethyl ketone, industrial ammonia. Combined properly, those chemicals can create diversions bullets can't. Smoke screens, temporary blindness, sensory overload that doesn't kill but absolutely incapacitates." June exchanged glances with the others. "She's talking about chemical weapons." "I'm talking about non-lethal tactical advantages, using commercially available industrial materials that won't trigger alarms or seem out of place in a shipyard." I met Kenji's stare. "You need speed and surprise. I can give you both." Chemistry isn't just about poisons. It's about understanding how substances react under pressure, how to manipulate environments, how to create chaos from order. "And if something goes wrong?" Kenji's voice was low. "Dangerous. If Shin's men grab you, I can't protect you and execute the extraction simultaneously. Then don't protect me. Use me as the catalyst I'm supposed to be." I softened slightly, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "Marcus is my brother, Kenji. My responsibility. I won't sit here while you risk everything for my family. That's not who I am." The silence stretched like a molecular bond under stress, ready to break. Finally, Kenji exhaled. "What do you need?" I grabbed paper, sketching rapid molecular formulas. "Access to that shipyard's chemical storage. 20 minutes unsupervised. And someone who can follow instructions without asking questions." "You'll stay behind our perimeter," Kenji said. It wasn't a question. "I'll stay exactly where I need to be to make this work." I looked up from my calculations. "Salt and iron, Kenji. That's what ancient alchemists believed could transform base metals into gold. They were wrong about the chemistry, but right about the principle. Sometimes you need the unexpected elements to catalyze the impossible. His smile was grim. Then let's turn lead into gold, chemistry student. Let's burn down his empire and save my brother. I corrected. The gold is just a bonus. The Nakamoto shipyard smelled like rust and salt water and opportunity. I crouched beside June in the shadow of a shipping container, my makeshift kit spread before me like a surgeon's tools. Industrial ammonia, concentrated hydrogen peroxide, aluminum powder from the grinding shop, and a container of calcium hypochlorite I'd liberated from the pool maintenance section. "You're sure about this?" June whispered, watching me measure compounds with the precision my lab work had drilled into muscle memory. "Chemistry is always sure. It's the variables that kill you." I mixed the calcium hypochlorite with the ammonia in a sealed container, creating a volatile suspension that would vaporize on impact. "Tell Kenji I need 3 minutes after you hear the first reaction. Not 2, not 4. Exactly 3. June nodded and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me with my compounds and my racing heartbeat. The sniper positions were obvious once you knew where to look. Elevated catwalks with clear sight lines, 2 on the east side and 1 commanding the western approach. Shin had positioned them perfectly for a conventional assault. But chemistry didn't play by conventional rules. I moved low and fast toward the eastern perimeter, carrying my volatile mixture in a stabilized container. The first sniper's position was beneath an exhaust vent, the metal still warm from the day's industrial runoff. Perfect. I placed the container on the catwalk access ladder, added the hydrogen peroxide catalyst, and ran. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. White smoke erupted in a violent exothermic burst, the chlorine gas mixing with the ammonia to create a dense fog that sent the sniper scrambling down, choking and temporarily blinded. Not lethal. I'd calculated the dilution ratio carefully, but absolutely incapacitating. East side compromised. I heard someone shout, "Can't see shit." I was already moving to the second position, where barrels of acetone sat conveniently near a welding station. This time I used aluminum powder mixed with rust, thermite's less dramatic cousin, creating a reaction that generated blinding light and thick black smoke when ignited by a simple road flare. The second sniper abandoned his post as flames licked up the metal supports, more surprised than injured. 3 minutes. Kenji and his team would be moving now, using the chaos as cover. The third sniper was sharper, already repositioning when I reached the western catwalk. But I'd saved the best reaction for last, a mixture that would create a pressure wave of expanding foam, the kind used in fire suppression, catalyzed to expand rapidly enough to knock a man off balance, without permanent harm. The canister hissed. White foam erupted like a geyser. The sniper's curse was lost in the sound of his weapon clattering to the concrete below. No shots fired. No alarms triggered. Just chemistry doing what chemistry did best, changing states, transferring energy, creating chaos from carefully controlled reactions. I heard gunfire then, but it was Kenji's team, moving through the compromised perimeter like water finding cracks. My radio crackled. "We're in. Where's Marcus?" "Central warehouse." "I'm coming." "Nia, stay." But I was already running toward the building where my brother was being held, where Shin waited with his beliefs about power and weakness, where the final reaction would either save us or destroy us. The equation was in motion. There was no stopping it now. Marcus was zip-tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse, his face bruised but defiant. Shin stood behind him, relaxed, confident, a man who'd already calculated the outcome and liked his odds. 3 of his men flanked the exits, weapons trained on the doorways. Then Kenji walked through the smoke I'd created, gun lowered, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "It's over, Shin." Kenji's voice carried across the concrete expanse. "My men have neutralized your perimeter. The police are already receiving anonymous tips about this location. You have one chance, walk away. Disappear. I won't hunt you. Shin laughed, the sound echoing off metal beams. Still playing the benevolent king? Your father would be ashamed. He pressed his gun barrel against Marcus's temple, and my brother's breath hitched. This is why you'll lose, Kenji. You think mercy is strength. But mercy is just fear dressed in noble language. Mercy is strategic, Kenji countered. Dead enemies create martyrs. Living enemies create warnings. Philosophy from a man who's already lost. Shin's finger moved to the trigger. The girl dies watching her brother. You die knowing you failed them both. And I take what should have been mine years ago. I stepped from the shadows, my last chemical compound palmed in my hand, a glass vial of concentrated acid, crude but effective. Or option 3. You remember that I'm the one who ruined your perfect poison. That I'm the variable you didn't account for. Shin's attention shifted just for a second, and that second was everything. Kenji moved with lethal precision, his shot taking down the gunman to Shin's left before the man could react. June and the others poured through the entrances, and suddenly Shin's numerical advantage evaporated like volatile compounds under heat. Drop it, Kenji commanded, his weapon now trained center mass on Shin. For a moment, I thought Shin might surrender. His gun lowered slightly, his posture shifting toward compliance. Kenji took a step forward, and I saw the micro-expression that my psychology classes had trained me to recognize, the brief flicker that preceded violence. Kenji, left hand. The hidden blade flashed from Shin's sleeve, a spring-loaded mechanism aimed at Kenji's throat. But my warning gave Kenji the split second he needed. He twisted, the blade slicing air instead of artery, and his return shot was final. Shin crumpled, his expression frozen in disbelief. Even at the end, he couldn't comprehend how he'd lost, how loyalty and chemistry and the variables he dismissed as weakness had catalyzed his downfall. I ran to Marcus, my hands shaking as I cut his restraints. He collapsed into me, 14 years old and crying, and I held him like I'd done when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. You came, he whispered. Always, I promised. Chemistry, remember? Bonds don't break that easily. Kenji stood over Shin's body, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked at me, I saw exhaustion and relief and something deeper, the recognition that we'd survived not despite our differences, but because of them. The reaction was complete. The equation finally balanced. The auditorium buzzed with the restless energy of 500 graduating seniors, but I only noticed one person in the crowd. Kenji sat 3 rows back, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored charcoal suit among parents wielding cameras and grandmothers clutching tissues. He caught my eye and raised his program in a subtle salute. Marcus elbowed me, his own graduation gown from last month's high school ceremony still fresh in memory. You're staring again. It's embarrassing. I earned the right to stare, I whispered back. I literally saved his life. Multiple times. And he funded your research lab. You're even. Not even close, I thought, but they were calling my name. Nia Robinson, Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, summa cum laude. And then I was walking across the stage, accepting the diploma that had cost everything and given me more than I'd ever imagined. The reception afterward was held at a hotel that would have been impossibly expensive a year ago. Now it was simply where Kenji had booked the private room, because the legitimate shipping conglomerate he'd built from his father's ashes generated the kind of wealth that didn't require illegal shortcuts. Dr. Robinson, he said, handing me a glass of wine as guests mingled around us. Not doctor yet, but he'd been calling me that since I'd been accepted to the graduate chemistry program at MIT. Though I suppose I should start calling you Professor Robinson eventually. Let's start with Nia and work our way up. I examined the wine, a Chateau Margaux, because Kenji had a sense of humor about trauma. Should I smell this first? Check for poison. I watched them pour it myself. Also had it analyzed by 3 separate labs. His smile was softer now, the hard edges worn smooth by a year of therapy and transformation. The tattoo on his neck had been joined by another, a small chemical formula for a catalyst, hidden just behind his ear, where only I would see it. Some reactions are worth protecting. We toasted, the crystal chiming like it had that night at Onyx Lounge when everything changed. The wine was perfect, no bitter almonds, no hidden violence, just the complex notes of a vintage that had survived time and pressure to become something valuable. Your father would be proud, I said quietly. The business is clean. The family is legitimate. You finished what he started. We finished it. Kenji's hand found mine. Activation energy, remember? I needed a catalyst. Marcus appeared with a plate piled dangerously high with appetizers. Are you two going to be gross all night? Because I have a curfew and limited tolerance for chemistry metaphors. We're scientists, I told him. Everything is a chemistry metaphor. But as Kenji pulled me close, his lips brushing my temple, I realized some reactions transcended scientific explanation. Some compounds couldn't be broken down into their component parts without losing their essential nature. We were no longer separate elements. We'd bonded into something new, stable, strong, and beautifully volatile when the situation required. The perfect compound. Unbreakable vintage. Thank you for listening to our story. If this tale has captured your heart, please hit like and subscribe to become part of our growing, story-driven family. Comment below what emotion gripped you most, and join us on this unfolding journey. Your support fuels these whispered narratives and keeps the flame of dark romance alive. Until we meet again, know that every heartbeat in our story beats with you.